Hi, I'm Giles Martin. I'm here in Abbey Road Studio 2. I was actually born in 1969 on John Lennon's birthday, which fascinated him. He said to my dad, "No, you're not sort of arsehole he's going to turn out to be." It's funny, growing up as a kid, having a father like George Martin, you can't compare it to anything else. I've never actually swapped dads with anyone. But we didn't necessarily, myself and my sister didn't necessarily grow up in a terribly musical house, apart from, as a kid, I noticed my dad played the piano a lot, and odd people would come back and forth. In fact, when I was a playgroup, they went around the class, and I was about 4 or 5, and they said, what do your parents do for a living? And they, my dad's an accountant, my dad's a lawyer, my dad's a truck driver, whatever. And I said, my dad just sits at home and plays the piano. And it turns out he was writing, I think he was writing the music for Live and Let Die, their film at the time. And there's huge embarrassment amongst my parents. They go, he's not employed, he's got a proper job. And so it wasn't a sort of thing. I think growing up I didn't necessarily grow up in a musical household. It wasn't, I had the privilege of meeting people like Paul McCartney at an early age and meeting, the Beatles at an early age, but they were just friends of my parents. It didn't mean a whole lot to me as a kid. I remember when I became interested in the guitar and became interested in songwriting, Paul did say to me, he was incredibly encouraging. He goes, "That's great, I find it difficult to write songs, and I'm Paul McCartney." So I did have a privileged sort of background as far as that goes. My parents were always very wary of me getting a proper job. I learned to play the guitar, as some people might be able to see, quite badly, but behind my parents' back, it was a thing, don't join the music industry. I'm delighted I did. In fact, I really got involved in music because my dad started to lose his hearing when I was about 16, and he needed a second pair of ears, and he didn't really want to tell people he was losing his hearing, so I became his ears to a certain extent. I'd come in and try and help him. Through that I would learn off him, and we started working together, and it was actually a great thing because I was needed to a certain extent by him, which is nice as a son and a father working together. And at the same time, he was always very good. He never had a sort of "that's my boy" kind of attitude. He was always very receptive to my ideas, and in fact he's been receptive to people's ideas throughout the whole of his career, and he treated me no differently and was always open to my suggestions, however wrong they may be, and God knows I made lots of wrong ones. So it gave me a chance to learn, it gave me a chance to respect him for what he does and what he's done. I never thought of, I was never any good at learning songs off by heart. I mean, I bluffed my way through most things. I've never been terribly accurate at playing anything. I can play a number of things very badly, but I was much more interested in playing for a reason. So as soon as I learned to play the guitar with a friend of mine, we started playing in the underground here, started playing in tube stations. Playing whatever songs we could learn, basically, as you do. And my dad was especially distraught by this. He didn't want, George Martin's son being arrested because it's illegal. At that stage, it was illegal to busk. In fact, the way we played it should have been illegal, but it was illegal to busk. And I then got into playing bands. I formed a band, as you do, and I had a great time. I think playing in a band, learning to play an instrument, learning to play the guitar was the best thing I ever did. And not that I practice the guitar or play it very often now, but it opens so many doors as far as if you're willing to play it to people, if you're willing to bore people with it. It's great, to meet people and chat. It's like a great hobby to have. It's better than video games, for instance. And I think that being in a band taught me more about recording and music, fun enough, than being the son of George Martin did. Because people, if you're the son of someone, people expect you have this knowledge, which generally you don't have. People think you grew up in recording studios. Of course, I'd spent more time in studios than probably other people are 16, but it's still just a row of buttons. If you're 16, it's still just, a compressor. Of course, I know what a compressor does. I hadn't got a clue for a long time because people expect you to know these things. But if you're in a band, especially as I was in an unsuccessful band, you have a chance to make a whole lot of mistakes and learn stuff. And the hardest thing, not that it's a bad thing, but the hardest thing if you're a son of someone famous or a child of a famous person is you don't get that many chances to make mistakes before people are hoping for the second coming. People are going, he's going to be just like his dad. And if you screw up, you're then the other way. He couldn't get a proper job. And so being in a sort of hidden band gave me a chance to learn. And that's what, you know, music is about evolving. It's about discovering new stuff. It's about learning new songs. It's about learning how things work. It's not about playing the same old things every day, then things become boring. After playing in a band, I carried on playing, and I always played with people, always like going on tour and playing in pubs and clubs. So I thought, you know, it was just great fun. And I started writing jingles, I started writing commercials. I started doing gasoline adverts. That was for France. French gasoline was the peak of my life. And that was when I was at university. And then when I left university, I wanted to become a record producer. I wanted to write music for people and produce people, but I couldn't. I didn't have any, you know, what do you do? You can't go, I'm the son of George Martin, let me produce you, you know, or give me a job. And so I ended up working in press. And at the same time, I started looking at bands. And funny enough, my dad was he was nervous, I think, of me following in his footsteps at this stage. And I saw a band called My Life Story. They're playing at the Astoria in London. And I went to go see them play, and I thought they were good. And they had a whole lot of strings, and I did an arrangement of them and produced them. And they released a single that became sort of #1 in Melody Maker and Enemy and the Cool magazines. And someone showed it to my dad, said, look what your son's been up to. And I was just doing it in the evenings, you know, as you do if you're a fan of music and you want to get into music. And that kind of opened doors for me. I left the press job and became a producer. Production engineering is something you learn stuff all the time with, like any sort of music. I mean, I think for me, starting out and how I am now, if I can work in any form of music, I'm happy. It doesn't matter. It's just, you know, I think I produce more stuff now and remix and mix stuff now, probably because in a way it's what people expect of me, and maybe I'm okay at it. The Love project came from the fact that they needed to do a show. It was George Harrison and Guy Liberté, who's the head of Cirque du Soleil, were friends. And they decided to do a show, and they decided they couldn't have anyone singing Beatles songs a la Mamma Mia. They didn't want, you know, a chorus singing Hey Jude on stage. And I think that's the right decision. And so they approached my dad, and I'd just had quite a lot of success in the UK doing classical stuff at the time. And Apple came to see me, and I sat with my dad and talked to them about it. And I said to them, I could try creating a gig that never happened. And Neil Aspinall, who was the head of Apple, said, you know, I'd love, you know, we talked about, because he was their roadie, we talked about their shows. We talked about, you know, starting off with Long Tall Sally and finishing with Twist and Shout, or, you know, creating the thing. And I said, well, listen, with Pro Tools and digital stuff, I can perhaps create a gig that never happened. So, under complete secrecy, I went upstairs here into a very small room and took some material, and I took at the beginning, the drums from the end, and Get Back, because I realized they're the same tempo, and because I thought I'd start a gig, never happened, with a drum solo going into a song, and started moving things around, and, you know, people said mashing up. I always thought it was a bit rude. And then thought, how am I going to start this? And got the piano from A Day in the Life and turned that backwards, because I thought if that makes a good ending, it'll make a good beginning as it sucks into the chord from Hard Day's Night. I just had fun, you know. And my view was, you know, if I can impress my dad doing Beatles stuff, then that's pretty good. You know, as a son, you're always trying to impress your dad, I think, or compete in some way. And it just so happened that it was on Beatles stuff, and I was auditioning for the Beatles. And I really thought that they probably wouldn't like it. You know, I really thought people would think this is a really bad idea. It sounds like a bad idea if you just talk about it. And I then took Within You, Without You and Tomorrow Never Knows and stuck those together, because I thought this will definitely get me fired, if nothing else. And they came and they really liked it. They liked the ideas. And so I ended up becoming the sort of, you know, the sort of legacy which I kind of fought against for a long time. And here I am now in Abbey Road talking about it. Suddenly became part of it, and I backed up all the catalogue into Pro Tools and started working on this project, which became Love. I came in with my dog Stan and went to my room and started working. You know, we had a list. I worked with the director of the show and my dad. My dad would come in sort of 2 days a week, and I'd play him ideas and we'd work through stuff. So he was kind of producing me doing it. But the bosses were the Beatles, Ringo and Paul, and Olivia Harrison and Yoko Ono, who were representing George and John. And it was important that they liked everything. They had to hear everything before it was passed anywhere else. And the interesting thing about the Beatles, it's such a protective circle, rightfully so, that if you do something and no one likes it, no one ever hears it. You know, and that's actually quite a good thing for me, because it means I could take risks. You know, occasionally people at Abbey Road were sort of, you know, people who hadn't heard anything, which the majority of people here, didn't like the idea of what we were doing, and didn't like the idea of me coming in and changing. People think it's changing history, but it's not, because I'm not deleting anything. I wasn't, you know, I was just really trying to do something different. And Ringo and Paul would come in. The funny thing is they come and listen to stuff, and they're not allowed to take stuff away either. It's not like you give them a CD. The only chance of them listening to the new mixes we were doing was by coming here and listening to them. And then later, as we got the technology sorted out and secure drives were done, I would go and see Yoko and sit down with her and work through stuff. And it's fascinating. For me, it was fascinating because I have no past with them. You know, I certainly wasn't there at the time. And so it's kind of on an even, I'm way down the pecking order, but it's kind of, I mean, on an even keel, as it were. There's no history. I have no, you know, experience of anything they did. So it was quite easy for me just to go, do you like it, or what don't you like about it? And they were very proactive in it, all four of them, you know, the two wives and Ringo and Paul. You know, Paul was the one that would give me the fear, because he's such a good musician. I mean, Ringo's a pretty good musician as well, and they'd you know, they know their stuff and they know their own material. And occasionally, in fact, when we were doing the show, I sat down with Paul, I went through each bit and, you know, played him bits in the theatre, and it was great. It was a great evening. And he goes, you know, he said to me, you know, I'd have to say I really like what you've done, and what you've done has been sympathetic with my music, and I really appreciate that. For me, that was just, you know, the best. But when it came to the opening of the show, at the very beginning, when people walk into the theatre and they're sitting down, I couldn't work out what, because they wanted Beatles music to play, and someone said, well, why don't you just do another 60 minutes of, and I mean, it took me 2 years to do the 90 minutes. So I decided to get as many Beatles on as I could by taking the vocals off, which is difficult with Beatles stuff because there's so much leakage on the tracks, and just play the backing tracks. So it's like the Beatles are playing their backing as you walk in. So you have Dear Prudence with no vocal, you know, you have Should Have Known Better with no vocal, and Penny Lane with no vocal. And the idea was that it would counterpoint Because. When Because starts, it's just vocals. So I'm sitting with Paul, and my dad's there and Paul's there, and Penny Lane's playing in the ceiling of the theatre. And Paul goes, and what's this then? And I went, it's Penny Lane. He goes, I know it's bloody Penny Lane, but what's it doing in the ceiling? And I said, well, I just thought it would be an idea to, you know, because they listened to everything. I thought it would be an idea to maybe put the backing tracks up there. And he's like, oh, okay, you know, I'll have a listen. And it's right there, because it is their music. And, you know, and my dad sometimes, you know, he feels embarrassed because it's not his music, and it certainly isn't mine. It is theirs. There were 4 Beatles, and it was their band, and that was it. There's no 5th Beatle. With music, there's things you'd like to do. I wish I could play things better. You know, I've always thought, you know, it'd be great to really learn how to play the bass properly, or guitar properly, or piano properly. You know, but it's just a question of time. Maybe I'll start watching our video tunes and then become a better musician. But you know, I'd like to, you know, work with, you know, a really good young band. At the same time, I'd love to go and do something like the Love Project with something else, you know, with taking stuff and creating, make people listen to music again. The good thing about Love is people do analyze and people do listen, and people don't have it on the background, they do actually get into it. And that's why we do music. We do music because we're passionate about it. And so really, I mean, I'm about to write a television thing, you know, it's a question of writing, producing, and being creative. And anything that lets you do that, you take. And every day, I just can't believe I can do this for a living. You know, I was told by my parents for years it's an impossible job to do for a living, despite coming from my background, because I think maybe when I have kids, I'll be doing the same thing. You know, don't go into music. You know, but you do it because you love it, and if you can get paid for it, it means you don't have to do another job to get in the way as well. So it's fantastic. I would say to anyone learning an instrument, anyone, you know, struggling, because let's face it, we all struggle with instruments all the time, and we struggle with music. is that no matter how hard it is, it's hard for everyone. And that love that you have for it, never let go of it, because you might be trying to learn a song and go, I'm never going to learn this. But the fact of it is, you do learn, and you do move on. And the thing to do is never ever give up. Never ever lose that drive and that feeling you get when you work something out or you hear some great music. Because it's much better than sitting down and watching the telly. I mean, the thing about music is that I think if anyone's toured, I used to tour a lot. You end up kind of working on automatic pilot. And you start amusing yourself with stuff. I was playing bass in a band, and you start playing the same things over and over again. And I was once in Germany, and I used to jump off the stage. And I jumped off the stage, and I had no idea until I left the how far I was jumping. We played the end of the concert, and I jumped off the stage, and there was no crowd there. I mean, let's face it, we weren't that popular, but there was a break before the people. And I launched off the stage, and seeing the band's faces, and they looked at me, I was like, oh my God, I'm going to die. I'm going to die in a shit club in Germany. And I dropped about 12 feet. My bass amp almost followed me, because I didn't have wireless or anything. The bass, it was like Wile E. Coyote. My lead unraveled. It's the only thing that kept me alive. And an Ampeg SV200 or they're called came crashing down afterwards. But yeah, I spent most of my time being laughed at by people. I think it's important. I think it's important in studios to have a good laugh. It's funny, I mean, it's the Beatles. It's one thing that was shocking for me from listening to all of the tapes, everything they did, was not how serious it was. It was how much kind of fun there is in the tapes. Even when you think, oh, the White Album, they didn't get on, they're really cracking up most of the time. And it's kind of, you forget that actually they came to the studio to have a good time. And all the other stuff you read about happened in offices and accountants and all that sort of stuff. Most of the studio stuff is great. And that's the thing about music. Music should be fun. If you're learning music, have a laugh with it. And don't sit on your own and do it. Find someone to play with. Because the great thing about music is there's always someone worse than you. I mean, in my case, you really have to hunt them out. But there is. And so show off to someone. Well, the great thing about the internet is the fact you can delve into the world of songs and work out chords. And one of the problems I've struggled from is you look on the internet, and quite often the chord sheets are wrong. There's some guy going, if you know the right way this song goes, please write in. You think, oh, that's no good. I can work that out. And the great thing about iVideo tunes is it breaks down that barrier, and you've suddenly been taught by professionals. You've suddenly been taught in a simple way by professionals. It's kind of inspired me. I saw iVideo tunes before I got involved in it, and it's inspired me to going, right, I'm going to see if I can learn the piano better now. And I think that's a great thing. People don't have access to the best people in the world, and now with iVideo tunes they do. You can be taught by some of the best people, from home. And the way it's shot and the way it's done is very simple. If I can understand it, it's very simple. So I think it's a great thing. It's a great learning tool for people. And I think hopefully it'll create great musicians in the future. Can't buy me love. Hi, this is Giles Martin. I'm here at Abbey Road Studios to talk about Can't Buy Me Love. Can't Buy Me Love was recorded on the 29th of January 1964 in Paris, not here. The reason why the Beatles in Paris is at that time they constantly toured, and they also had to go into the studios to record German versions of singles they'd had in order to break into Germany. It's a little known fact the Beatles really had to, they were ambitious and they fought to try and break into countries. And there was a belief which neither my dad or the Beatles really believed, but EMI insisted that they recorded songs in German. Germany's a big market. So they went in to the EMI studio in Paris to record She Loves You and A Hard Day's Night in German, which is funny. My father actually did German versions of Beatles songs with Peter Sellers about a year later. But while they were there, and typical, opportunist Beatles, they recorded Can't Buy Me Love. They were constantly working and touring, and in between doing their proper job, they recorded a #1 single in about an hour. They did it in about 4 takes, and the reason why they could do that is because they could play so well live. They're underestimated as a live band, but they could really cut it. You know, the 3 of them had been in Hamburg for 3 years, and Ringo had played constantly live anyway, and that's how things were done then. So there's no other way to record. The Can't Buy Me Love is a 4-track, like the majority of Beatles songs. As it's an early track, and a lot of Beatles stuff. On one track you have drums, guitar, and bass. This is fairly typical. Later on, Paul wanted his bass separate because it always went on later. But early stuff, drums, guitar, and bass on one track. And the way this was done is, from listening to the 4-track, is you have Paul in a box playing bass, probably with his amp elsewhere, and singing live, and John singing live and playing acoustic guitar, and the drums playing live. And George was on a separate track. They put the lead guitar on another track, in case they need to drop in. So the song was constructed in this way. So they're using 3 tracks. They put the vocal on a separate track, even though he's singing live, just so there's some degree of control. I mean, not much control in modern standards, but the great thing about early recordings is that you make your decisions when you play the song, and it gives you that great live feel that maybe it's lacking in some today's music. And then on top of that, and this is normal for most Beatles records, the vocal was double tracked, and the guitar solo was double tracked as well on the same channel. And the vocal this time round was recorded slow. They slowed the tape down, and Paul sang lower, and sped the tape up again. And this happens a lot in Beatles. People don't really notice it, but what it does is it gives you a very tight pop performance. You know, people spend a lot of time nowadays, cutting and chopping vocals. At least with tape, you can actually slow down, get a live performance, and speed up so it's tighter and actually more in tune, and you speed things up. So that's how Can't Buy Me Love was constructed. It was basically the band playing live with just 2 overdubs. Can't Buy Me Love is basically a blues. You can play it as a blues. Originally, it was very much like She's a Woman, which was a B-side, the same kind of thing. And as it evolved in the 4 takes they did, it became the first thing actually my father suggested was they stick the chorus in the beginning. And that seemed like a good idea because immediately, they're constantly thinking about you want people to capture the song, So it starts with the chorus. It's kind of interesting the counterplay you have between the rhythm. On one element you have Ringo playing straight on his ride, he's constantly splashing on his ride. As a counteract that, you have Paul's kind of swinging bass line, almost playing fifths, and interspersing it. And on top of that, you have John really playing 4s on his guitar. He's just playing blues in 4s, just bashing out chords in 4s. And with all Beatles stuff, there's always like a straight element. In this case, it was John just playing straight, which means that Paul and Ringo could swing around him. And that's where you get that kind of Mersey beat feeling going on. It's one of those things, like a lot of Beatles songs, you sit and play it on the guitar, and it's not going to sound like the song. You need someone else pulling you in another direction. Get a friend, and one of you plays the bass line. Can't buy me love. So to demonstrate roughly, I'm not the world's best bass player, but I'll demonstrate roughly what I was talking about with the counterplay between the bass and the guitar. What Paul's doing on the bass, he's playing sort of a fifths pattern, which is so that's the first verse, but what he does, which is very McCartney, in the second verse, he'll start throwing in a blue note, which is and same So that's what Paul's playing for the song, which is kind of very, you know, it's he's driving it, which means that Ringo can be splashing and bashing out in the rides. So the bass is playing a sort of fifth pattern, very McCartney fifth pattern, especially very early McCartney fifth pattern. You know, the song itself starts in the chorus, which I'll bash out. I'll give you some idea of the interplay between the rhythms, which is, you know, it's just pretty much a straight. And here we are. So he's just playing straight. With that, you have that classic sort of Beatles thing, which is they use a lot. And the great thing, I'm not, you know, I don't think I'm a great rhythm guitarist in any way. I know kind of how instruments work, but John Lennon was a great rhythm guitarist, and he'd be able to push things through. Underestimated he is a rhythm guitarist. You know, he kind of, with his forceful playing, he didn't mess about in any way. He just kind of really had good time and marked out where the bars were, which gave Paul room and gave Ringo room. So and that's the way a lot of these early songs worked. The song itself starts with the chorus, which is E minor, A minor, E minor, A minor, D minor seventh, G seventh, or G, sorry. G, there you are. Mistakes are made all the time. And then the song is just blues. It's C7. S7th. C7th. C7th. G7th. F7th. Which is very similar to She's a Woman, which is, you know, again, and it's funny, they recorded the songs, they wrote the songs kind of almost back to back, and I think they changed Can't Buy Me Love, pushed it so it wasn't like She's a Woman, and that's why they changed it while they were in the studio.
Can't buy me love, love, can't buy me love.
This is Can't Buy Me Love by the Beatles. This song's in the key of C in standard tuning. And guitar 2, which is John Lennon's acoustic rhythm guitar, is playing some basic chords in the beginning. E minor, just an open E minor chord for the first measure, open A minor in the second measure, open E minor, the third measure, back to A minor in the fourth measure, and then to D minor 7 in the fifth measure. So you can think of this just as a standard D minor chord in open position without the third finger. So basically we're adding that C note into the D minor chord, which makes it D minor 7. So my first finger is actually fretting across strings 1 and 2 at the first fret, barring there. My second finger is on the second fret of the third string. I have the open fourth string, D minor 7. And then the trickiest chord of the intro, which is G6. So my first finger is barred across the entire third fret. My second finger is on the fourth fret of the third string. My third finger is actually fretting two strings, the fourth and the fifth string, at the fifth fret. And my fourth finger is fretting the fifth fret on the second string. So the bass note there is G on the sixth string, third fret. So that's a G6 chord. And if you have trouble fretting the fourth string with that third finger, you can just lift it up and mute it. That's just as well. So the strumming pattern is pretty simple. It's just going to be down, 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 up, down, up. And I would say that the very beginning of the song, the first entrance, he kind of anticipates the beat a little bit, comes in on the and of 4 preceding the first E minor chord. But in general, the strumming pattern is just going to be down, 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 up, down, up, down. Just like that. And it's got a little bit of a swing to it as well. So that's the guitar 2 intro for Can't Buy Me Love.
I'll buy you a diamond ring, my friend, if it makes you feel alright. I'll get you anything, my friend, if it makes you...
For the verse and the electric guitar solo, the rhythm guitar, John Lennon's acoustic rhythm guitar, is essentially doing the same thing. And it's just basically, in a sense, a 12-bar blues form in the key of C. involving 3 chords, as 12-bar blueses do. And the first one is a C7 chord. So this is just like a basic C chord with a B flat added to it. So I've got my 4th finger on the 3rd fret of the 3rd string for C7. You can mute the 1st string or let it ring in there, either way. The 2nd chord of the progression is going to be the 4 chord of the key, which is F7, and I want you to notice the 3rd finger for this. Notice that that 3rd finger doesn't actually move. It's going to stay exactly where it is. The 1st finger just bars across the 1st fret, and the 2nd finger plays the 2nd fret of the 3rd string. So that's F7, and then back to C. The 3rd chord in the progression is the 5 chord of the key, and that's G7. This is simply the same thing as the F7 chord, just moved up 2 frets to the 3rd position. You could add the 4th finger there on the 6th fret of the 2nd string, put the 7th above there, and that would also work on the F7 as well, putting the 4th finger on the 4th fret of the 2nd string. So before I show you the progression, I want to kind of talk about the strumming pattern, which is really pretty straightforward. Just 1, 2, 3, and 4, and 1, 2, 3, and 4, and 1. More or less that. It doesn't have to be exact, and in fact, if it has a little variation, that's actually going to be more authentic and sound better anyway. But the important thing to really get out of John Lennon's rhythm guitar style, especially from this era, is the backbeat essence, really hitting that 2 and 4, and especially in this case the beat 2. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1. So anyway, the progression itself is going to be 4 measures of C7 to 2 measures of F7, and back to 2 measures of C7, 1 measure of G7, and then to F7. You're going to stop right on beat 1, come back in the next measure, still on F7, and then into the 12th measure on C7. That would be a 12-measure progression there, and in the case of the verses of this song, that's going to be played 2 times for a total of 24 measures. So it'll sound like this. And again, that's the same rhythm guitar part under the guitar solo as well. So that's the rhythm guitar, or guitar 2, verse for Can't Buy Me Love.
Can't buy me love. Everybody tells me so. Can't buy me love.
The chorus is 8 measures long, and the guitar 2 part is similar to the intro. It starts with E minor, A minor, and then to C7 for 2 measures. Back to E minor, A minor, D minor 7, to G6. So the whole thing will sound like this. And that's the guitar 2 chorus for Can't Buy Me Love.
Can't buy me love.
The outro is 8 measures long, and it's essentially the same as the intro. The only exception is after the G6 at the end of the intro, you're going to go to a C7 chord and strum down, 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 adding 2 measures to the end there, just on C7. So it'll sound like this. And that's the guitar 2 outro for Can't Buy Me Love. This is the guitar 2 performance for Can't Buy Me Love.
Can't buy me love. Love can't buy me love. I'll buy you a diamond ring, my friend, if it makes you feel alright. I'll get you anything 'cause I don't care too much for money. Money can't buy me love. I'll give you all I've got to give if you say you love me too. I may not have a lot to give, but what I got I'll give to you. I don't care too much for money. Money can't buy me love, can't buy me love. Everybody tells me so, can't buy me love. No, 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 no. Say you don't need no diamond rings, and I'll be satisfied. Tell me that you want the kind of things that money just can't buy. I don't care too much for money. Money can't buy me love. Can't buy me love. Everybody tells me so. Can't buy me love. No, 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 no. Say you don't need no diamond rings, and I'll be satisfied. Tell me that you want the kind of things that money just can't buy. I don't care too much for money. Money can't buy me love, can't buy me love. Love can't buy me love. Oh. Can't buy me love. Love can't buy me love.
This is Can't Buy Me Love by the Beatles. This song's in the key of C in standard tuning. And for the intro, the electric guitar is just playing accents really on the chords. And the chords, as we learned in the acoustic part, are E minor to A minor, E minor to A minor, D minor 7 to G6. And I would refer you to the acoustic part to learn the exact voicings if you're not sure of those. But at any rate, the part itself, the intro, is 6 measures long, and what's interesting is the electric guitar just accents beat 1 and the offbeat after beat 2. You're literally just strumming those beats, so it sounds like this. 1, 2. And so the chord voicings themselves are exactly the same as the acoustic part: E minor to A minor, E minor to A minor, D minor 7. And when you get to the G6, rather than fretting the full bar chord like we do in the acoustic part, you can actually just make a 4-string version of that by playing the third finger on the 5th fret of the 4th string, the 2nd finger on the 4th fret of the 3rd string, the 4th finger on the 5th fret of the 2nd string, and the 1st finger on the 3rd fret of the 1st string. So that's G6. And it's definitely more or less accenting the top 4 strings, I would say, on each of those chords for the electric guitar part. And that's the electric guitar for the intro on Can't Buy Me Love.
I'll buy you a diamond ring, my friend, if it makes you feel alright. I'll get you anything, my friend, if it makes
One of the interesting things about the Beatles arrangements is that they left certain places open as far as the guitar parts went. Some parts, the John Lennon part would carry the song, and some parts they'd both be playing, and vice versa. So on the verse of this song, there's actually no electric guitar in the recording at all. But if you wanted to just play along, of course, you could just play the C7, the F7, and G7 chords that we outlined in Guitar 2. And that's the verse for the electric guitar on Can't Buy Me Love.
Can't buy me love. Everybody tells me so. Can't buy me love.
For the chorus, the electric guitar is playing essentially the same chord accents that we had in the intro between the E minor and A minor, D minor 7, and G6 chord. And as you'll notice in the chorus, there's an extra 2 bars of C7 that come in after the second measure. And for those 2 measures, the electric guitar just simply lays out. You don't play, so it'll sound like this. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. And that's the electric guitar for the chorus on Can't Buy Me Love. I'm going to play the guitar solo in time and then break it down slowly. So the first part of that starts with a pickup from the 5th fret on the 3rd string to the 4th fret on the 2nd string. Then you're going to bend the 6th fret on the 2nd string up a whole step 3 times. And then you're going to pick it while it's bent, releasing it back to the 6th fret, down to the 4th fret of the 2nd string, to the 5th fret of the 3rd string, back to the 4th fret of the 2nd string. So far. Continuing, you're going to have the 6th fret again, bend up twice, release bend, back to the 4th fret on the 2nd string. And at this point, you're going to drop down the scale. So you're going to go from the 5th to the 3rd fret on the 3rd string, and then the 5th, 3rd, and 1st fret of the 4th string. So you get, so far that part is. And at this point, it switches to the F7 chord in the rhythm. So, and I want to mention the solo is, of course, played over the verse chord progression, which is just a 12-bar blues, really, in C. So when he gets to the F chord, he's going to fret a little F chord here in the first position. My first finger's on the 1st fret of the 2nd string. My second finger's on the 2nd fret of the 3rd string. And you're going to fret the full F bar chord and strum. So, and moving back to the bend that we started with. So far we got. And the very last phrase is going to start with a slide from the 3rd to the 5th fret on the 4th string, but at the same time you do this slide, you're going to try to get the open 3rd and 2nd string with it. Bringing it back to the 3rd fret, and then 1st, 3rd, 1st fret on the 4th string to the 3rd fret of the 5th string. So, and a quick slide from the 3rd fret to the 5th fret on the 4th string to the 3rd fret of the 3rd string, 5 to 3 on the 4th string, 1st fret on the 4th string, down to the 3rd fret of the 5th string, and then a quick hammer on into the 3rd fret of the 5th string. So good. And that's the guitar solo for Can't Buy Me Love. The outro, as I mentioned in the acoustic guitar part, is exactly the same as the intro. It just ends on a C7 chord at the end, so it'll sound like this. So as you notice, so when I hit that C7 chord, I'm just hitting it right on the downbeat and letting it ring in what would be the 7th measure of the outro. And for this C7, it's different than the other one we had in the acoustic part. I'm barring the 3rd fret, strings 1 through 5, and muting the 6th string with the tip of my 1st finger. My 3rd finger's on the 5th fret of the 4th string, and my 4th finger's on the 5th fret of the 2nd string. I simply hit that and let it ring. And that's the outro for the electric guitar on Can't Buy Me Love. This is the electric performance of Can't Buy Me Love.
Can't buy me love, love, can't buy me love. I'll buy you a diamond ring, my friend, if it makes you feel alright. I'll get you anything, my friend, if it makes you feel alright. 'Cause I don't care too much for money, money can't buy me love. I'll give you all I've got to give if you say you love me too. I may not have a lot to give, but what I got I'll give to you. I don't care too much for money. Money can't buy me love, can't buy me love. Everybody tells me so, can't buy me love. No, 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 no. Say you don't need no diamond rings, and I'll be satisfied. Tell me that you want the kind of things that money just can't buy. I don't care too much for money. Money can't buy me love. Can't buy me love. Everybody tells me so. Can't buy me love. No, 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 no. Say you don't need no diamond rings, and I'll be satisfied. Tell me that you want the kind of things that money just can't buy.